One thing that I feel like isn't talked about enough is when us as fans see potential in a character, actor, or franchise, but the studios just decide to snatch it right out from under us. It doesn't matter how much we like a specific character or how eager we are to see the full potential of a character properly utilized. If the studios plan a shift or don't align in a way that makes them money, then those characters are automatically halted and almost always destroyed or replaced. So in today's video, we will be taking a look at 10 characters that were robbed of their potential, starting with number 10. Now, unless you live under a rock, you should know exactly why Kang was replaced in the MCU. I'm not going to speak on the details of what happened, nor my opinion on the situation, but the biggest thing to note is the fact that Kang was being set up to be the main villain of Avengerskangdynasty that was later renamed Avengersdoomsday. The first time we would see Kang appear was in the Loki TV series as the leader and the head of the TVA. The second time we would see him appear would be in Ant-Man Quantumania, and he would again be the main villain of the movie. However, he does actually end up dying, therefore triggering the Council of Kangs to be the big threat in Avengerskangdynasty. Now, we would never actually see that pan out because again, Jonathan Majors ended up being dropped from the role and Marvel decided to go in a whole different direction. And I ain't gonna lie, even with this situation being unfortunate and me liking Jonathan Majors as an actor, I'm personally glad we did get this change because I never really liked Kang as a villain in the first place. But even then, it still is interesting to think about the fact that Kang was going to be the main villain of the new Avengers movie, and we'll never see what that version of the movie was actually going to look like. And that does actually remind me of number 9 on the list. During this point in time, when it came to Batman, everything was all over the damn place. We had talks of a Ben Affleck Batman movie, the Robert Pattinson Batman movie, and the shelved Batgirl movie. And on top of that, we had Michael Keaton returning as Batman in the new Flash movie. But even with all that going down and Michael Keaton actually returning as Batman, I definitely wasn't expecting to see George Clooney return as his own version of Bruce Wayne at the end of the Flash. And I honestly feel like this was a missed opportunity for George Clooney to finally redeem himself. A lot of people like to blame the nipple suit and goofiness of the earlier Batman movies all on George Clooney, even though if you want to be technical, it actually started with Val Kilmer. But even with that said, people still like to blame George Clooney for it, and I really think if the DCU actually continued, even though it was a fucking mess, we would have finally seen George Clooney redeem himself as an older and more mature Batman, which I'm not gonna lie, I really would have liked to see that, but we unfortunately never will. And another thing we'll never get to see is the Leslie Grace Batgirl movie, which I still can't believe it got written off as a tax deduction. Even though the movie had a lot of negative attention surrounding it, I personally was actually interested in seeing this movie. Not only was it set in the Batman 89 universe, but Michael Keaton himself would be returning as Batman, as well as J.K. Simmons would have played as Jim Gordon. I feel like even with the negative attention surrounding this movie, it still did have some potential to be a decent movie set within the Batman 89 universe. And while we're still on the topic of Batman, let's talk about the Ben Affleck Batman movie we never got. For the longest time when Ben Affleck was still Batman, we were supposed to get a Batman movie set in the DCEU. The rumors were that it would take place in Arkham Asylum and be a lot like the Arkham Asylum game. Batman was said to be struggling mentally with the death of Robin, making it more of a dark psychological story, and the main villain was set to be Deathstroke. But of course the movie was abandoned and Ben Affleck would end up stepping away from the role as Batman. Now I ain't gonna lie, I've never liked Ben Affleck's version of Batman, and I feel like that's solely based on the shitty movies he was put in, because I honestly do feel like Ben Affleck was definitely meant for the role after seeing him in The Town. I just don't think we ever got to see his true potential because of his own personal problems he was going through, as well as being placed in a shitty movie that was clearly rushed. Now while I'm on the topic of Ben Affleck stepping away from this movie, it would actually go hand in hand with the next person on the list, and that would be none other than Joe Manganiello's Deathstroke. To this day, I hate the fact that we were teased with a perfect version of Deathstroke and we'll never see it again. I think Joe Manganiello was a perfect fit for the character, and on top of that, the suit was literally spot on. I think this one hits harder than the rest because we actually got to see what he looked like at the end of Justice League, and man, just look at that suit. It reminds me so much of the Arkham Origins Deathstroke in so many ways. But again, judging by the fact that the DC universe has been completely rebooted, we will never see this version of Deathstroke ever again, which is definitely unfortunate. Another character that was completely erased by a reboot would be Blackcat in the Amazing Spider-Man universe. We were so close to seeing this character finally appear on the big screen, but those plans unfortunately changed when Spider-Man was rebooted. And if you didn't know, Felicia Hardy did actually appear in the Amazing Spider-Man 2 as Harry Osborn's assistant, but that's all we would ever see of her because again, Spider-Man ended up being rebooted. And while I'm on that topic, let's go ahead and speak on the best Spider-Man to ever be on the big screen. To this day, I hate the fact that Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man was replaced, especially by this bullshit. I personally feel like the Amazing Spider-Man universe was building up to so much that we unfortunately never got to see, like the Sinister Six movie that was rumored, as well as the Amazing Spider-Man 3. Again, I personally like Andrew Garfield's version of Spider-Man, and I really feel like the Amazing Spider-Man 2 didn't do the character any justice. But I can say what I hated more than the way the character was handled was the ridiculous amount of hate most of, if not everybody who watched the Amazing Spider-Man movies absolutely hated this version of the character, and the sad part is there was honestly never a real reason for any of the hate in the first place. But what irritated me more than that is the fact that the same people that hated this version of Spider-Man was then glazing when he returned in No Way Home. There is nothing that irritates me more than that goofy ass shit right there. It reminds me of everyone who hated the fact that Robert Pattinson was playing Batman, but as soon as they seen how good the movie was doing, they wanted to glaze the fuck out of it like they do with everything else. Point is, I really think Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man has so much untapped potential that we'll never get to see, but fortunately for us, we will get to see him return in some type of capacity in the upcoming Avengers Secret Wars movie, so I'll definitely be looking forward to that. Another character that had potential but we only ever got to see a hint of it would be John Krasinski's Mr. Fantastic. To this day, I don't know what the fuck Marvel was thinking by making Pedro Pascal's box-headed ass Mr. Fantastic. This was one of the biggest missed opportunities I've ever seen, and the fact that we actually seen this version of the character pop up in Doctor Strange 2 only adds fuel to the fire, because we all got to see how perfectly this actor fit the character, and like I said before, why? What the fuck was Marvel actually thinking when making the stupid decision of this version of the character being a one-off cameo? And just to elaborate even more, I'm not even a fan of the Fantastic Four, but I definitely could tell you I'd rather see this version of Mr. Fantastic instead of this Roblox built ass motherfucker right here. Another character the MCU fumbled was Edward Norton's Incredible Hulk, cause what the fuck is this? I don't care what excuse y'all try to give for this shit, whether the character was too dark or the character didn't fit the bigger picture. I honestly don't want to hear none of that bullshit. Y'all replace what is undoubtedly the best Hulk we've ever seen with this corny ass bullshit, and I'll never understand it. This is still a character that has so much untapped potential. I can only imagine this version of Hulk going up against Thanos in Infinity War compared to Ruffalo's Hulk, and even though he wouldn't have won, I could definitely guarantee the fight would have been a hell of a lot more entertaining than the bullshit we got. Now, the biggest letdown in superhero history when it comes to characters with wasted potential would be none other than Henry Cavill's Superman. And don't get it twisted, I'm not one of those delusional people who for some reason think Batman vs Superman or the Justice League was actually good, because they both were actually trash. However, when it comes to Man of Steel, that shit was peak, and the fact that we never got an actual follow-up to Man of Steel irritates the shit out of me, and I honestly feel like if Zack Snyder focused on that instead of a rushed universe, the DCEU wouldn't have felt as bad as it did. And what makes the situation worse is how Henry Cavill was handled through all of this. Not only did they have him star in these shitty ass follow-ups to Man of Steel, but they also fired him from being Superman to then bring him back and let him go again. To this day, I wonder what Man of Steel 2 would have looked like, but unfortunately we'll never get to see it, just like the rest of the characters on this list. Y'all let me know how y'all feel about all the characters down below. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure you leave a like, and till then I'm out, stay tuned.